Mrs. Kate at the Library of Whispers. Today we're going to take a look at this lovely history book, The History of London. It's a Times mapping history book. It's also a lovely library book too, with one of resistance were encountered. The invasion force then advanced to the Thames, which the troops crossed successfully in two places, probably by means of a floating pontoon bridge constructed by the military engineers and by swimming across. The Britons retreated eastwards, and the pursuing Roman army lost many men in the Essex marshes. 360, and when Londinium became the capital of the province, there was an upsurge in commercial vitality and much upgrading of the port facilities. Indeed, the port seems to have reached its peak of activity during the late 1st century. Londinium's street system was laid out, and many parts of the city had become densely built up by about AD 100. Shops and commercial buildings had been built along the main road leading from the Forum. Residential areas and public paths had been developed away from the main streets, and the amphitheatre and fort built to the west of the town. The Emperor Hadrian visited Londinium in AD 122, and many public buildings were either built or rebuilt for his visit. However, very soon after, in about AD 125, Londinium was again severely damaged by fire. A date fixed by the quantities of burnt pottery found on various sites. The reigns of the emperors Antonius Pius and Marcus Aurelius in the mid-2nd century were not a stable period in general for Roman Britain, and Londinium in the mid-2nd century was beginning to undergo changes. Houses and workshops in the Walbrook Valley and elsewhere in the city and Southwark were no longer required and were deliberately demolished. In certain areas such as Milk Street and Newgate Street to the west, they were overlaid by a dark earth which initially must have been brought from outside the town. In addition, the large public baths at Huggin Hill and the smaller baths at Cheapside were demolished towards the end of the 2nd century, perhaps because their maintenance for a much reduced population could no longer be justified. Despite this, Londinium was still regarded as important by the Roman authorities, and this is testified to by the construction of a new timber waterfront and a massive city wall which enclosed 330 acres, making Londinium the largest city in Britain. At a period when the working population seems to have abandoned large areas of the city, the wall extended beyond the existing inhabited areas and stretched from modern-day Blackfriars to the Tower, where the ends of the wall must have had special fortifications to prevent attackers reaching the city. The tributaries of the Walbrook were allowed to flow through the wall in brick culverts. The city wall was perhaps built to protect the capital during the civil wars at the end of the 2nd century. Clodius Albinus, governor of Britain, had declared himself emperor in AD 193 and had taken most of Britain's troops to fight on the continent. He may well have realised the importance of protecting Londinium against any advances the true emperor Septimus Severus might have chosen to make. The dating of the wall has been made possible by finds of coins. One coin set a date for its construction not earlier than AD 190, and other coins and clay coin moulds belonging to a forger indicate that it could not have been built later than about AD 210. In AD 200, Britain was divided into two separate provinces. Londinium was made capital of Britannia Superior or Upper Britain, and Eboracum, York, capital of Britannia Inferior or Lower Britain. While large numbers of sculptures and inscriptions belonging to the 3rd century indicate that Londinium was still a town of considerable importance and wealth, its population was reduced and large This is the statue of a British hunter, god, and was found in Southwark, 3rd century AD. And here we have a gold medallion from Arras in France, showing the city of Londinium welcoming Constantius Chlorus, who rescued the city from plunder in AD 296. In AD 286, Corosius, the admiral of the Roman fleet based in the English Channel, was accused of taking the treasure of Saxon and Frankish pirates for his own use. Crossing to Britain, he declared himself emperor and ruled Britain until he was murdered by his financial advisor, Electus, in AD 293. This was a period of political and economic isolation for Britain. To compensate for the loss of official coinage reaching Britain, Corosius in AD 288 created for the first time a coin mint in Londinium, which continued to produce coins spasmodically into the 4th century. In AD 296, the army of the Roman Emperor Constantius Chlorus landed in Hampshire and defeated Electus near Caleva, Silchester. Constantius sailed up the Thames and arrived in time to save Londinium from being sacked by rebels from the defeated army of Electus, restoring Britain to the empire. In the early 4th century, the Emperor Diocletian completely reformed the whole imperial system of government with a policy of devolution, which was to alter the political status of Londinium, and this move perhaps coincided with the demolition of the Forum and Basilica complex. Britain was subdivided into 4 smaller provinces. Despite this division and the political upheavals, Londinium retained its place as capital of the new province of Maxima Caesariensis. Following Constantine the Great's conversion to Christianity in the early 4th century, the Christians became powerful in Britain. Records show that a bishop of Londinium went to the Council of Arles in AD 314. The Mithraic temple was attacked on several occasions, and sculptures were broken up and discarded. It seems that the Mithraists forestalled one of the Christian attacks by burying the more precious marble sculptures. The temple was to continue in use for pagan, but not necessarily Mithraic worship for a few more years, until the building finally fell into ruin in the mid-4th century. Political unrest the city. So here we have a map showing Londinium here. This is the Thames, this wiggly blue line out into the North Sea. Baths was also sited at the junction of the Thames and Walbrook. Built between AD 80 and 100, it may have been the governor's headquarters. Areas of the building are now buried under Cannon Street railway station, and recent excavations there have added more information. The great building covered a wide area for at least 3 acres and consisted of staterooms, reception halls and offices, as well as baths and living accommodation, all built around a central garden court. To the north was a great hall. The east wing consisted of small rooms and may have been the quarters for visiting officials or administrative offices, while other areas probably contained the residential quarters. For their entertainment, Roman Londoners would have congregated to the amphitheatre, in which animal baiting and possibly gladiatorial combat took place. It may also have served to stage plays, house state ceremonials, and as a training ground for the army. It was situated in the south-east of the fort, and its site has only recently been uncovered. It consisted of an oval arena of packed sand, with an underfloor drainage system. A main entrance way was discovered, with the remains of 2 ante-rooms on either side, suitable as waiting rooms for the participants or combatants in the arena events. As befits the capital of any Roman province, sanitation and hygiene were given a high priority. The Britons were encouraged to adopt the pleasures of civilization, including daily bathing. Public bathhouses in Upper Thames Street and Cheapside were built in the late 1st century and enlarged in the 2nd. The Cheapside bathhouse was sited near to the Roman fort, and because of its small size was perhaps intended for the military rather than the public. The baths in Upper Thames Street, however, were built on a grander scale, overlooking the Thames in a position